The Kyoto Protocol is an international treaty that was made effective in the year 2005 by the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, also known as the UNFCCC. The treaty was designed to set binding obligations on industrialized countries, or MEDCs, to reduce emissions of major greenhouse gases. This involves support for renewable energy, the improvement of energy efficiency, and the reduction of deforestation. UNFCCC's primary goal is to prevent dangerous anthropogenic interference of the climate system and the stabilization of the concentration of gases in the atmosphere. It is also important to note that LEDCs do not have binding targets under the Kyoto Protocol, but are however committed by the treaty to reduce their emissions. This is because they are not seen as the main culprits for emissions during the current period of industrialization.
In fact, in a meeting preceding this, all countries, all governments realized that industrialized countries will have to reduce their emissions by somewhere between 25 and 40% by 2020.
The reason for the creation of the Kyoto Protocol was that developed countries have contributed the most to the buildup of CO2 emissions in the atmosphere, which was around 77% of emissions between 1750 and 2004. In the UN estimate of 2008 emissions, it shows that out of a total of 29,888,121 tons of CO2 emissions, 9,638,831 tons originated from the US and the EU combined.
Our challenge remains clear and urgent: to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to strengthen adaptation to the even larger climate shocks we know are on the way no matter what we do.
The targets for the first commitment period are over the emissions of the 6 main greenhouse gases. These include carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, hydrofluorocarbons, perfluorocarbons, and sulfur hexafluoride. These greenhouse gases are the top gases which contribute to climate change. The greenhouse effect is the result of the atmosphere trapping the heat which radiates from Earth to space. Should climate change continue to increase at the current rate, there will be consequences that harm every country in the world, such as increased wildfires, droughts and desertification of land, increased duration and intensity of tropical storms, and flooding which leads to soil erosion. However, the Kyoto Protocol has also been the cause of a lot of controversy and opposition. The top 6 CO2 emitters are China, the US, EU, India, Russia and Japan. India and China have ratified the protocol but are without binding targets, being LEDs.
The United States refused to sign the last major international agreement on greenhouse gases, the Kyoto Protocol, which runs out in 2012.
The United States would convene a series of meetings of nations that produced most greenhouse gas emissions, including nations with rapidly growing economies like India and China. The way to meet the challenge of energy and global climate change is through technology. And the United States is in the lead.
Instead of mandates, each nation will set its own targets and come up with an individual plan of action based on its own unique mix of resources and energy needs.
Now clear that Kyoto is not the path forward for a global solution to climate change. If anything, it's an impediment.
It says here that the goals of the Kyoto Protocol are not established by science but rather by political negotiation and are therefore arbitrary and ineffective in nature.
And the issue of climate finance, well, for the most part, rich nations like the United States were not interested in pledging cash as they grapple with the financial crisis. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon warned in his opening address in Doha that events like Typhoon Bopha in the Philippines and Hurricane Sandy in the US could become the new normal. It's felt urgent action is required, but if this conference is anything to go by, urgency is in short supply.
And WWF, along with all of the other civil society organizations, we are hugely disappointed. I mean, this is a year when people all over the world felt the impacts of climate change. Yet governments came here with no money for developing countries, no real emissions cuts, and no ambition to help themselves prepare for a global agreement in 2015.
In conclusion, without the USA ratifying the protocol or recently emerging economic powerhouses such as China reducing emissions drastically, the targets will likely not be met. Even the permissible degree of global warming generated by target levels, if reached, will have far greater environmental impact than was originally envisioned. Therefore, while the Kyoto Protocol has good intentions, it is more of a stepping stone than true revolutionary and major action against emissions and therefore climate change as a whole.